This is A World on Purpose.
A purposeful life is the most important kind and the most valuable kind of life.
Every choice that we make makes a difference, for better or worse.
I loved walking in a village and seeing the before and after.
This is the podcast dedicated to those humans choosing to live larger by working for the greater good. And these are their stories. Stories of hope and of true change that come from living on purpose.
What if you were to suddenly say there are no challenges, there are only opportunities?
Regardless of where you come from, your financial identity should determine where you end up in life.
I'm your host, Alyssa Fisher-Harris, and my hope is that my inspiring guests will take you on an introspective journey that helps you tap into your own pivot to purpose, bringing greater meaning to your life. Welcome to A World on Purpose. Ocean activists, explorers, and filmmakers Philippe and Ashlan Cousteau have spent their lives and careers dedicated to protecting and restoring our dying oceans. But what directed them to choose oceans as their mission? Listen to them share about how their united passion for oceans came to be, one from a generational family legacy, and the other through a specific experience that led to a classic pivot to purpose. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to A World on Purpose, your podcast that's all about purpose. I am your host, Alyssa Fisher-Harris, and I am so excited today. I'm probably going to say that about every guest, but I'm especially excited today to bring to you some dear friends of mine and a group of friends of mine who are just extraordinary human beings in the world, all around purpose, living with purpose, for purpose, and on purpose. In my mind, they are the dynamic duo of oceans and exploring and entrepreneurship and journalism and filmmaking. I mean, you guys do it all. So I would like to introduce Philippe Cousteau and Ashlan. Ashlan, do you like to be Ashlan Cousteau? Or
it depends.
What is it now?
Now I'm just kind of Ashlan Cousteau, but sometimes I still go by Ashlan Gorsky.
Okay. Okay, got it. So Ashlan and Philippe Cousteau, welcome. I'm so excited to have you guys here. Who would have thought that the last time we actually saw each other in person, that the next time we saw each other, we would be sitting in our homes on a Zoom call in the middle of a global pandemic? I mean, that never would have crossed our minds in a million years, right?
No, not at all.
3 months ago, if you had told me that this is the new normal, I would have said you're crazy. So,
yeah, I agree.
So, the world has changed dramatically, very quickly.
It has. Well, I know we're going to touch on that a little bit. This show, though, I had conceptualized this in my mind quite a while ago, wanting to really help lift people and wrap their head around trying to understand what their purpose was, what their mission was in life, and to live a mission-driven lifestyle. So we are going to touch on the pandemic a little bit, but let's talk about some really great uplifting stuff about life in general. Before the pandemic, what it's going to mean after the pandemic, and we'll get into the pandemic a little bit later. So before I get into the stuff that you guys are working on, which we caught up on is so amazing, all the stuff that you guys have going, I don't know how you do it all and have a new baby. So we'll touch on that later as well. But what I like to do initially when I introduce my guests, what I want to know is what I call your origin story in terms of purpose. When was it in your life? I want you to tell me a little bit about your background, how you got here, and when you had your own what I call pivot to purpose, which was realizing in that moment in your heart when my life isn't just about profit or doing all these other things. It's about, really making a difference in the world. And so why don't we start? Which one of you want to start? You want to go? Rochambeau for it?
Sure.
Okay, Philippe first.
For me, it really is something that I was born with, I think, in many ways. It's in my DNA, and it's certainly in my family legacy. My grandfather, being a world-renowned explorer and filmmaker, Jacques Cousteau, who co-invented scuba diving 76 years ago and really pioneered the exploration of the ocean and pioneered the conservation of the ocean. Land terrestrial-based conservation had been a thing since, I would say, at least in modern times, since the late 1800s, at least in the United States, with the establishment of the first national park by President Grant. And later on, John Muir and these kinds of icons of the conservation movement that we're all familiar with. But the ocean was still seen as something that was basically this vast, endless blue thing that we knew virtually nothing about. And it really wasn't until my grandfather came along with his invention that people were able to swim freely like a fish and explore the oceans in a way that was unprecedented. And he made documentaries and films and opened the world's eyes to the ocean. My father then followed in his footsteps, Philippe Sr., until he died tragically in an airplane accident in 1979, just 6 months before I was born. But he produced dozens of documentaries and films and also traveled around the world and was a world-renowned explorer. So growing up with that legacy, I think, had a big influence on me from before I could even remember. And the sense that a purposeful life is the most important kind and the most valuable kind of life. And I don't mean valuable from a monetary perspective, but I mean valuable in terms of giving us meaning and a sense of a place in the world, was always ingrained into us. I say us, I say my sister, Alexandra, and myself. So that was just something that I think was part of who I am from the earliest time.
I love that. I think that's so important. You know what? I don't know if a lot of people know that your grandfather actually invented scuba diving. I think people are really aware that he was this amazing ocean explorer. I mean, I certainly grew up watching him, fascinated, living the way I lived in my life in a world landlocked, never, having seen the ocean and to be able to go there. But I didn't know, most people I don't think know that he actually invented that. So that's an incredible piece of information. He did. He opened up the world underneath for everyone, which I think is so great. Ashlan, why don't you talk about your pivot to purpose a little bit?
Yeah.
And your origin story.
I grew up in North Carolina and I loved the outdoors. I loved animals and I loved swimming. My parents would joke that when it rained, I would try to go outside and flop around in the puddles. And I had a dream of traveling the world. And I remember watching one day 2 shows, and it was MTV's House of Style, which was hosted by Cindy Crawford, and Wild On with Brooke Burke. That was on E. And I remember thinking to myself, my God, that's a job. Someone will pay you to run around the world to these amazing places and interview these really interesting, cool people. So I told my parents at that point that I wanted to be a journalist, to which they both said, okay, good luck. We live in North Carolina with no connections. But I pursued that goal. I went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. It's one of the best journalism schools in the country. And even my professors thought I was a little crazy, that I wanted to do entertainment. But I forged ahead. And I ended up landing my dream job at E! News. I was a correspondent and fill-in anchor there for about 7 years. And around that time, I met Philippe. And I was just, the 7-year itch happens in careers and it happens in jobs. It hasn't happened in our marriage, so that's very good. But it happened in my career at E! So around that time, I was starting to be, do I really want to be talking about Justin Bieber's hair and Kim Kardashian's tush all day? And Philippe was going down to give a presentation for the in Quito, Ecuador, for the UN Migratory Convention. The UN Convention on Migratory Species, and they asked if I would host the convention, which of course I said yes. So I went down there. It was amazing. We had this great thing, and afterwards we go to this amazing party at I think the Royal Palace. And the president's there. Cool. All the higher ups of Ecuador are there. Everybody,
ministers.
Yeah, people, the head of CITES, the head of all these big people from the UN. And Philippe and I got separated for a second, and so Philippe started having all these little fans come over and talk to him, and I'm just sitting there do. And all of a sudden, someone comes up to me, and they ask me about George Clooney, and then someone else comes up to me and starts asking me, and the next thing I know, my crowd at a very serious political event, my crowd is the same size as Philippe's crowd, maybe even a little bigger. And that was my point when I was like, my gosh, these people who are, intelligent, life with purpose, and they still need that moment of zen, that entertainment, gossipy stuff. And I said, that was the moment when I thought, I think that if for good, because the power of storytelling and the power of pop culture can really get everyone excited about events and about issues. And that's really when I decided, okay, I want to use what I've learned in pop culture and storytelling and journalism and apply it to these issues that are happening around our world, and more importantly, connecting the dots for people. So when we talk about climate change, a lot of people think of a polar bear, but climate change is really about people and about humans and about babies. And so that's really when I made my pivot.
I love that so much. I think it's so interesting when you realize that the path that you're working on, I've talked about this with people before, where you do all these different things in your life, right? Not knowing necessarily how they're all going to connect to each other, but eventually they do, right? Entertainment, now they're calling it infotainment, or they started that years ago, right? I mean, that's a very important tool. We can reach people with really meaningful, impactful information through those avenues. And so for you guys to have married those skill sets with, everything that you're trying to do and work on in terms of ocean restoration, conservation, awareness, etc., is so cool. I know that you guys met. That's when you first met, correct?
Yeah, we first met. Philippe was giving a talk about the BP oil spill. So that would have been in June of 2010. Mm-hmm. And he had been covering it because, you can tell that story.
Well, it was around June. So the oil spill had been going on for a couple months at that point. And I ended up, unbeknownst to me, I was going to end up spending almost a year going back and forth down, or more than a year going back and forth down to the Gulf to cover that story. What ended up happening is I was watching the news about a couple weeks after the initial spill, and I was listening to commentators across the spectrum. I mean, every news network, not just the more conservative one, and saying that the government, the EPA, is applying this dispersant to the oil, and it's making the oil go away. And I was like, that's not right.
Yeah.
Dispersant doesn't make the oil go away.
Oil doesn't just go away.
It doesn't just disappear into the ether. Nothing does, right? There's no such thing as a way. And so I was on the board of the Ocean Conservancy at the time, and we had a board meeting right around then, and they gave us a briefing about actually what the dispersant is. It's a surfactant and a solvent. And what it does is it breaks up the oil, breaks the surface tension, breaks up the oil, and the solvent breaks it into small droplets, and so it can descend into the water column. So it doesn't go away, it just disperses throughout the water column, which arguably is worse, but it's what BP and the government wanted to have happen, which is get out of sight and therefore out of mind. And so, because once it's spread out in the water column, there's no way you can collect it, right? Part of the argument is that it disperses and it gets diluted, but one single drop of oil is deadly toxic to fish larvae and eggs in an area the size of an Olympic swimming pool. So that doesn't work. And so I was hearing on the news, this is making the oil go away. And I was like, that's nonsense. So I contacted ABC and Good Morning America. We went down to the Gulf and we decided to dive into one of the slicks and show the world that the oil wasn't disappearing. It was actually dissolving, or not dissolving, it was dispersing into the water column and making the whole water column all this red, mucky goo. And we saw dead fish floating in the water, and jellyfish and algae covered in oil. And that launched my kind of year covering the BP oil spill for CNN and NBC and numerous networks. And I was invited to LA to give a speech there about the BP oil spill to folks in the entertainment industry. And so I agreed. I came up here, did this speech, but right beforehand, I saw this, at the time with her heels on, 6'3", so as tall as me, blonde across the room. And I was blown away, of course. We met, we had a mutual friend, and we've been together ever since.
Yeah. I know. I've heard various versions of that story because I've, kind of watched you guys on different interviews, and I love it so much. By the way, Ashlan, you are what I thought I would look like when I was 12. So stunning, gorgeous, tall. I got a little bit on the short side, but that's okay. You can't tell from here, which is great. But what I wanted to ask you guys, because you've talked about this meeting that you guys have had before. I mean, the beautiful thing about the two of you that I love so much is that not only do you guys get to live your life of purpose and do what you love, you get to do it with the person that you love, which is so rare and so amazing. And go ahead.
Well, I'm incredibly fortunate, that's for sure. And she's definitely helped me up my game. I think one of my favorite stories from when we met is that the photo they used to advertise this speech, I was in the Gulf and along the shore, and it was, full of mud and wet and ocean, etc. The currents were going in, the tide. And so I was wading in the water. So I had water shoes on, of course, as one would do. And so the photo has me crouched with like oil on my hands looking at the camera, and I'm wearing these water shoes.
So water shoes is a nice way to say they looked like horrible, ugly mandals.
I've heard you say that.
And I was like, my girlfriend forwarded me the poster, forwarded me the invite. And I was like, oh, that's kind of, and I remember looking at it and I was like, that's sad. That guy could be cute if he wasn't so dorky in those mandals. And like when Philippe walked in the room that night and like, skinny jeans and like a really nice button down shirt, I was like, my friend, what is that? She's like, that's the guy giving the speech. I was like, the dorky guy in the mandals. She's like, yeah. I was like, oh, well then we're definitely staying.
There you go.
It has helped me up my game since then, though I will say that I have converted her to the value of water shoes, mandals, sandals, whatever you want to call them.
I now have
when you're
water safety shoes or blah.
When you're in wet places.
Yes.
You kind of need them. So anyway.
Yeah. You
taught each other.
Yeah. I think that's great. Well, that's what marriage is all about.
That's right.
Exactly.
Any true partnership, right? Any partnership in general. That is a great place for us to take a quick break because we are doing this amazing, amazing series in 3 parts. A World on Purpose will drop 3 times a week. And so we're going to segue into the next phase, which is how all this amazingness came together when you two joined, and what you guys have been working on and how that love for the planet, for the ocean, and for each other has just fueled this amazing, real tangible work you guys have been doing in the purpose space and especially for oceans. So stay with us, everyone. We'll be back in a minute. But before we do, can we tell people how they can find you guys?
Yes, on our socials. So all my socials are at Ashlan Cousteau. That's Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And Philippe is at P Cousteau. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter.
Yeah.
Perfect. And that will be on the website, A World on Purpose, and we'll have it on all of our social media channels as well. And so stay tuned for part 2 of the Cousteau journey with me, and we'll be right back. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to A World on Purpose. I am your host, Alyssa Fisher-Harris, and this is part 2 of a 3-part series with my amazing, amazing friends and talented, I keep calling them the dynamic duo of oceans and ocean adventure, Philippe and Ashlan Cousteau. Welcome back, and thank you so much for your time on coming on the show with me today.
We're happy to be here with you.
Always delighted.
Well, you guys are amazing. So we got your origin stories and how you met, which I love hearing that. I could not hear that story too many times because there's always a fun variation that I didn't get the first time. So thank you for sharing that. We're going to talk now about kind of the actual boots on the ground work that your amazing union, both separately, beforehand, you touched a little bit on before, but what you guys have really done together as a couple, as a partnership, as these amazing adventurers and explorers. So, I'd like you to talk a little bit about, we are in a pandemic state, as we've touched on. We're kind of stuck indoors right now. That's exactly what happens in places in quarantine. No problem. Pick it up. This is all real, by the way. Authentic, genuine. We love it.
I just scared the patooties out of the dog.
He was napping no longer.
That's okay. So talk a little bit about the AR project that you guys worked on, AR/VR project that you guys really launched right before we kind of went in lockdown. And then we'll go into the amazing books that you guys are working on. And then after we talk about that, I really want to dive into Earth Echo International, which is kind of one of the focuses you guys are really funneled around right now, and some initiatives that you guys are leading through Earth Echo International. So let's start with the AR project.
Well, yeah, I think that, for Philippe and I, when we first started dating and we were first trying to figure out, how could we work together and spread this message of how, adventure and oceans and how important our planet and our oceans are. One thing that always frustrated me, and also I know Philippe, is that the environmental movement has always done a really good job at talking amongst themselves and not talking outwardly. Mm-hmm. Or sometimes if people talk outwardly, they talk in a very finger waving, like, I can't believe you do that. Why are you driving that car? And that doesn't change anybody's mind. It just really makes people mad. So for us, we were always looking on, how can we diversify the audience that's seeing these messages, that's getting excited about our planet. And I always love using the reference when I think of Leonardo DiCaprio and his film Before the Flood. It was incredible. But people that don't believe in climate change didn't watch that film. But his movie Blood Diamond, which was just, a big giant film, and it was all about the diamond trade, that made everyone everyone that saw the film thought about their jewelry in a different way. So for me, we need those serious documentaries, but we also need things that are going to speak to the unconverted, as we say, to the people that don't believe in climate change, or that don't really care about climate change, or the people that, like our ocean because they go visit it on their vacation, but they don't necessarily know about what's underneath it and the issues that it's facing. So we're always trying to diversify. So that's why we did a show for Shark Week, all about conservation. There only one that year, actually. We did a show for Travel Channel called Caribbean Pirate Treasure, and it was about looking for sunken pirate ships and pirate history. But we also talked about the problems the ocean is facing: plastic, storms, things like that. So another opportunity that came to us was this VR experience, because we realized that, so many people can't scuba dive or will never scuba dive or don't have the means to scuba dive. So we thought, how can we get more people under the waves?
Yeah, while I'm not a scientist, having been someone that's grown up in this, it's really easy when you're so close to a problem to really get inside your own head. And one of the wonderful things that Ashlan has caused for me to do is really broaden my perspective about what's okay, what we can try, be more playful and more experimental in terms of doing projects that are less earnest and telling stories in a less earnest way than I might have been comfortable with beforehand. And I think that's been revolutionary for me, and thus for us, to think about how we embrace new technologies and really think differently about telling stories and be okay with stuff that's a little bit more fun and playful.
Because if you think of The Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau, it was really a reality show. Yeah. It was
right. It was
going on an adventure, and you would learn about walruses and octopus, but you'd also watch the show because you'd see these cute Frenchmen in their little tiny bikinis, smoking cigarettes and drinking wine. It was, so for me.
Who doesn't want to see that?
Exactly. I'm it could have been Keeping Up with the Cousteaus, but to me, it was kind
idea.
Of right? So to me, it was always how can we get more people excited about these issues? Okay, sorry, I didn't interrupt.
Well, no, that's absolutely a great summary of kind of this evolution and what helped me to realize and grow and change. And thinking then about that, we had an opportunity to do a virtual reality project called Drop in the Ocean. And what was so great about that is that it really utilized that technology, which is really exciting. I think VR has a ways to go to replace television, the traditional kind of 2D experience. But where VR is very powerful is if it gives you an opportunity to have a completely different experience than you could have in the real world. So, for example, this project shrinks you down as a participant, and it's a shared experience for people to about the size of what would be the size of an adult thumb, and puts you into the ocean, so that all of a sudden, all around you are planktonic organisms that are normally microscopic, are the size of softballs floating around you. And we're narrating this whole experience as you're floating through and seeing this part of the ocean that most people don't even know exists, but is absolutely vital to our existence, because more than half the oxygen we breathe comes from plankton in the ocean. So then we float slowly to the surface, and you see a massive sea turtle come through and a whale shark. And then we're in a massive garbage island where there's all this plastic garbage floating around, and it's all enormous compared to us because we're so small in this experience. And it just changed the relative perception that you can have and the relationship with these spaces in a way that a traditional experience with 2D kind of television viewing could not do. So we did that, Drop in the Ocean. It's a terrific experience, and we're excited to get it back up and running once all of this is over. But that was really a terrific example of how we can use technology to reach people in a different way.
I totally agree. I think even now too, right, with everything we're dealing with, people are going to have to find creative ways to get access to content like that.
Well,
and so are you guys talking about maybe offering it up somehow to people in their homes as opposed to needing to go
that's next.
into the experience?
We're looking also educationally, how can it go into classrooms, et cetera? Because, I think one of the really important things to remember, to Ashlan's point about how we reach a different audience, when my grandfather was making documentaries, first Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau came out in 1968. What we like to say is that your audience came to you because there were like 7 or 8 channels on television, and that was it.
Right.
Maybe books, maybe a little bit of radio, but predominantly television. And so today in the world that we live in, and I think this is really important for people as communicators and storytellers, which we should all be if we live a life of purpose in terms of spreading either to our neighbors and our friends or around the world through media. Nowadays, you have to go to your audience. And so really what we've learned is that you have to create lots of different types of media opportunities because everybody self-selects the different types. Maybe it's scripted or it's unscripted or it's podcasts or it's books or it's animated or, long form, theatrical, short form, internet. There's so many different mediums now to reach people that as effective, purposeful storytellers, we have to be in lots of different places. And I think that's really how the media landscape has changed just in the last 10 to 15 years in such a dramatic way. And it's made it more opportunities, but also in some ways more difficult for those of us that want to reach a broad audience.
It's really hard to break through the noise out there.
Right.
There's just so much content, and there's content coming at you from every direction. It's on your phone, it's on your computer, it's on your TV, it's on your freaking watch. Like it is hard to break through. But that's another reason why good storytelling and positive storytelling and a little bit of humor is always great. So when we talk to scientists, we always say, don't be afraid to, use a little bit of humor, or don't be afraid to, make sure you're speaking to your audience, because if you're doing a very serious paper about something amazing, the average person isn't going to read it because they're just not going to really understand it. So it's not talk down to them, but just try to find a way to make it easily ingestible.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think it's hard for academics. I think, and this is not, a slight on them because they're brilliant and genius, but
brilliant.
There's a reason why you marry the two together, academics with entertainers, to help make that a little bit more digestible and understandable for people, yet still get the real meat of that, the real meaning of that information. And on that same note, talking about all the content that is out there and everything that's going on, first of all, I can't wait to do that experience. I will buy the Google glasses and do it myself right now in my own apartment if I have to.
Yeah, it would be great for home and people are stuck because it's so much fun.
It's fun.
I've done it a dozen times and it's still pretty magical.
Yeah.
Well, and I do know through my own work, I'm involved in a partnership, you guys know, in a company that's an impact consultancy. And we've been talking to a lot of different brands around that are in the tourist industry. How are they going to get people out traveling again, right? Because people are going to be a little bit nervous about it. And how can we have them still have an experience if they maybe don't necessarily go anywhere? So I would love to see what happens with that later. But going to regular content like written word, you guys are working on a couple books from what I understand. So tell me a little bit about those.
Got to be in lots of places.
Got to be a lot. You got to be doing
diversify. Yeah, so we're always up to mischief.
Talk about yours first.
Sure. I'm doing a book series with HarperCollins.
Terrific.
The first book comes out in the fall, the end of September. It's for middle-aged readers, and it's all about, it's called The Endangered, and it's all about a motley crew of endangered species that come together to thwart nefarious conspiracies.
Ooh, I love that.
It's a script. It's a fiction book. And we're already working on book 2. So, we're really excited about that because, that's just another way to reach people through, fiction writing.
And then I'm working on a book. It hasn't been announced yet, so I can't exactly tell you the title, but it is a book that makes the oceans very easy to understand. So it would literally be, it's a book about the ocean that makes it simple, because the ocean is big and complex and beautiful and scary and exciting.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's hard to understand, how does the ocean, control our climate? How does the ocean control our weather? How do the poles control more or less all of the fisheries in the ocetion? So it's down these large ideas for people in a simple way.
And fun way.
And fun.
And funny.
And fun, yeah. So, and hopefully just get more people excited about the ocean.
Well, I'm all for funny. So let's definitely do that. But we definitely need that now too, more than ever. I live in Venice Beach. And so I'm like 2 blocks from the ocean. And it's been a really interesting experience because I'm literally like there, but I can't touch it because we've had this situation. And I literally walk by it every day. And I just have this immense gratitude for its magnificence, because watching, obviously people love to recreate in it. We're thankful that it's there. Philippe, your grandfather obviously brought us there, and now you guys have with your VR experience. But to not be able to go out and actually feel it on your body and feel like you're part of it is a really interesting thing. Yet at the same time, it's actually helping the oceans, right? To not have all these people inside of it. So I want to touch on that a little bit later when we talk about some of these initiatives that you guys are working on, specifically with Earth Echo International, which we're gonna get into. So Earth Echo International, Philippe, from what I understand in my research as a pseudo journalist, you started this with your mom and your amazing sister Alexandra, who I've had the immense pleasure of also meeting in Iceland a few years ago. And she said something really interesting to us when we were in Iceland. She talked about how your grandfather explored pristine oceans. You brought that to the families and people who really never learned how to understand what it was to be in an ocean, what was under there, etc. And then your father segued into a space where it was really about, at that point in his life, it was about ocean conservation and how we want to preserve and protect the oceans and how important that is at that time. But now we've gone to a whole nother level where it's not even about conservation anymore. It's about needing to restore the ocean restoration. And so from what I understand, if you could give a little history about your origin of Earth Echo, and then how Earth Echo is starting to do those kinds of things in restoration, how that trajectory has shifted, it would be lovely. And then Ashlan, obviously how you're involved with that too.
Sure. The idea for Earth Echo International came to us about 15 years ago. We started it because we looked around at the landscape, and I feel that over the modern environmental movement, one of the big mistakes that have been made is that we have neglected education and building a youth movement. There's a lot of tactical work going on in the environmental movement, pass this law, try and get this legislation, whatever it may be, protect this area, set aside this, land. But the strategic work, the grand strategy, I think has been missing. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is that, as Ashlan mentioned earlier, we preach to the converted very effectively. I think for a multitude of reasons, but predominantly we have ignored the idea that the grand strategy needs to be a social and cultural shift in society, so that we are not voting in politicians of any persuasion that openly brag about their assault on the environment, that belittle the importance of clean air and clean water, or that lie about conservation. These are universal values that we need to embrace. And in order to achieve that, we have to have a social and cultural shift. In order to achieve a social and cultural shift, we need education, because there is no way that we always say that changing adult behavior is virtually impossible. The exception to that rule is the influence that young people have on adults. Mm-hmm. Not to mention, obviously, young people starting off in the right way. And so as an environmental movement, we have neglected education. We've neglected building a youth strategy for the environmental movement. And we've done so, I think, at our great detriment. And so looking around, I remember my grandfather telling me growing up, we can't talk about conservation until we talk about education. And so we started Earth Echo really to build that youth strategy for the ocean and for the environmental movement. And we become one of the largest groups that does that work in the world. We've got projects from Australia to India, programs everywhere. It's really, really exciting, and we're growing year on year dramatically. And so it's really about recognizing that we need society to embrace these issues. My grandfather's generation, as you mentioned, my sister said, it was about exploration. For my father, it was really about conservation. He was the one in the 60s that saw the health of the ecosystem in the Mediterranean and Red Sea, where he'd grown up diving, decline so quickly. He went to my grandfather and said, we need to be thinking about conservation, protecting these places. our generation, I think, is about that sense of restoration. I like to call it a generation of participation, because it's going to take all of us to come together to recognize that we have the power to renew and rebuild the environment, because it is incredibly resilient. And we can share a story about that later. But that's where the shift, I think, needs to happen in the environmental movement. We need to take some responsibility for having made some mistakes and some short-sightedness by neglecting youth and education over the last several decades. And we're working hard to reverse that and build that youth strategy.
Yeah, so I mean, the whole purpose of Earth Echo is to empower youth and help them recognize the power that they have to change the world. And you know, we've spoken many different places together and separately. And one thing that drives both of us crazy is when adults look at the youth and say, "You are the future. You can make the changes later." And it's like, but no, they can make the changes now. They have so much influence to change laws, to change public opinion, to do things for the better. And, you know, that's really what Earth Echo does, is it helps empower these youth. Because my gosh, I mean, when you hear some of the stories of these kids, it really makes you feel like you haven't been doing enough with your life. Because there was like Delaney. She spearheaded the Miami to pass a law that every single new build had to have solar panels.
And she was like 13.
She was 13.
When she did it.
And then there was another little girl at like 8, from between the time that she was 6 and now she's 8 years old, she's gotten half of her town to commit to being single-use plastic free.
Love it.
A 6 to 8 year old. So it's just amazing what these kids can do. They're so powerful.
Right. And obviously the most famous one is Greta Thunberg, right? A terrific example. It's gotten a lot of attention. And I think I love so much that you guys are focusing on youth at Earth Echo, because I do believe that is, it's true. The kids really are our future, but there's no reason to look to the future. The now is so important. I remember I had a friend who told me
power.
They do, and to the point where you talk about Philippe influencing your parents. You know, I worked with a colleague once a while back, and he's like, "Oh, great. My daughter told me as we're driving in the store, I went in and picked up some plastic straws, and she said, 'Dad, go return those right now because those kill turtles.'" And she's like 8. And so he's like, I'm changing my life. And it's true. You know, the kids come home, they learn at school about not smoking, about eating healthy. I think that is absolutely the most intelligent avenue you guys could be taking. And so we're going to take another break because we're wrapping up part 2 of part 3. This is so awesome. I'm just jazzed beyond words. And we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and finish with episode 3, where we're going to dive deeper into the actual initiatives that you guys are working on with Earth Echo and the Oceans Unite initiative around the 30 by 30 project. Super, super excited to hear about that. So tell everybody where they can find you before we go to a break.
On all of our Cousteau and at P Cousteau.
Okay, repeat that again because your internet cut out for a second.
Oh, sorry. You can find us at Ashlan Cousteau and at P Cousteau.
Okay, perfect. And thanks everyone for tuning in to part 2. Come back for part 3 because this is the meat. Not that it wasn't meaty before, because it was super awesome. But this is really going to be very inspiring and going to want to mobilize you into action. So come back for part 3. I'm Melissa Fisher-Harris. Thank you for tuning into A World on Purpose. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to A World on Purpose. I'm your host, Alyssa Fisher-Harris, and I am here today, part 3 of my exciting episodic adventure with the amazing Philippe and Ashlan Cousteau. So thank you, Ashlan and Philippe, for coming back for another discussion around all the great stuff that you're doing. You already talked about a little bit in the very first episode of your origin story, your pivot to purpose, how you met, which was so great. And then we touched in episode 2 on all the amazing projects that you guys have just been working on for the last few years, and how exciting it is to be able to integrate entertainment practices and fun and all those great things into purpose and aligned mission-driven work. An AR/VR project, some terrific books. Everybody will be able to find those on worldonpurpose.com and on your Instagrams and social media. And then we talked about Earth Echo International, which is your amazing, like literally your lifeblood of kind of what you guys do. I want to dive a little bit deeper into Earth Echo International. Philippe, thank you for giving us the background on that, sort of the mission and the vision. You guys talked to me a little bit earlier before we did our interview about two specific initiatives that Earth Echo is working on or integrated with. One sounded super exciting. I'd love for you to talk about. You had just gotten back from Necker Island. You had said hobnobbing with the infamous Richard Branson and a bunch of other amazing, was it 25 or something, Oceans Unite ambassadors. Can you tell us a little bit about that project, what's coming out of that, the 30 by 30, and what we need to know about it so that everyone can jump in and support?
Yeah, there's so many amazing groups out there, and there's so many amazing ocean groups, there's so many amazing land groups, and sometimes it's kind of hard to rally the troops together. And a lot of times NGOs are kind of all fighting over the same pot of money. So it's kind of hard to galvanize them under a kind of a single banner. And that's what's really so exciting about this idea specifically for the oceans that Ocean Unite is helping to spearhead, and we're both ambassadors for them. And it's that the eminent Harvard biologist E.O. Wilson, he had said that to really just stave off the worst of climate change and the worst of the biodiversity loss, which has been 50% of biodiversity has been lost in the last 40 years.
Wow.
On our entire planet. So half of our planet's biodiversity in our lifetimes. So he said, to really, to stop this, we're going to have to protect, is it 50% of land by 2050 and 30% of our oceans by 2030.
Oh my gosh.
Obviously being ocean people, we're really digging our heels really hard into the oceans. So right now, really only about 6% of our ocean is meaningfully protected. So 30 does seem like a long way off, but it is doable. And one of the first projects, and we've seen when you establish a marine protected area, that's really how you protect these parts of the ocean. And we've seen it in Cabo Pulmo. We've seen it in the Marshall Islands. We've seen that it works, that nature, if just given a little break, can rebound. And we're even seeing that right now during this COVID pandemic, that, just a little break from humans and endangered sawfish are flying, are swimming around in Biscayne Bay, and the dolphins are, dancing off of Ibiza.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of bad news out there. Yeah. And so that's one of the things that 30 by 30 represents. And this idea of marine protected areas that Ash was talking about here's the good news, is that there is a toolkit that exists for us to help renew and restore nature, which we talked about in the importance of that. And one of those is setting aside protected areas in the ocean that are biodiverse, important ecosystems, and giving them a break from people. Mm-hmm. Because then they can become more healthy and thus more resilient. Mm-hmm. As we're seeing with this pandemic, is a great example that COVID is more dangerous for people with underlying health conditions. Mm-hmm. Well, the ocean has a lot of underlying health conditions: coastal pollution, overfishing, plastic. And so what the movement is about recognizing that we need to set aside certain areas in the ocean to eliminate those underlying health conditions. Because climate change, ocean acidification, these big global problems are less impactful on those ecosystems, less negatively impactful on those ecosystems if they're healthy. In the same way that COVID is less deadly for people that don't have underlying health conditions, or tends to be, not always, but in most cases, suggested by the evidence. And so essentially what we're saying, and what this movement is, as Ash said, is protecting 30% of the ocean by 2030.
And one of the first places that we can do it is down in Antarctica. And what's so interesting about Antarctica and the Arctic, but the poles are so important to our entire ocean system, because it's the cold water that's at the bottom and the top that helps drive all of our currents, and more importantly, the nutrients in our ocean that are the basis of the food web in the ocean. So one of the first places that we could protect, there's 3 different marine protected areas that are on the table in Antarctica. And if we got all 3 approved, it would be 6% of our ocean.
Wow.
Oh, sorry. It would be, is it 6%?
No, it would be almost 4%.
Almost 4%. And then that would kick us up to 10% of our ocean, since we already have 6% saved. So that's kind of like the low hanging fruit. So we're really focusing on that. Right now there's 2 countries that are on the fence. And that is Russia and China. And so we're doing our best to kind of help those countries see why it's so important to protect the waters around Antarctica and for the entire planet. So that's kind of one of the first big things that we're working on.
Yeah, it's going to be critical. And again, I think a hopeful message to people that, there are areas in the ocean that we can set aside and not lose what biodiversity we have left. So
I think that's great. And Ashlan, for you, that kind of comes full circle, doesn't it, with Antarctica? Didn't you do your TEDx there?
Yes, I did. I did
very jealous.
I know, Philippe's jealous.
I know.
That was my 7 continents. So I've checked off all 7 continents. Yeah, Philippe has it.
You two are very competitive, aren't you? You like to one up each other, I think.
Healthy competition.
That's good. That's good. So you beat him in that stretch.
Yeah, and Antarctica is just such an amazing place. And one evening we had to do a safety training, and so we had to learn what to do if you got stuck out on the ice, and that is make shelter for yourself. So we each had to make our own ice hole, and
Wow.
I did, and then we slept in it for the evening. We slept outside in our individual ice holes. Huh. I just remember laying there, it was during summer, so it's 24 hours of sunlight. And it's almost like what I assume outer space is. It's kind of like a sound vacuum. There's really no sound there. So you're just laying there with no sound, bright lights, trying to sleep. And I just remember thinking, I actually got tears in my eyes because I thought, my gosh, this is the farthest away from humanity that I've ever been, from civilization. And this place is so important, and it impacts every single one of us on this planet. And that's really, I kind of vowed to fight for Antarctica for the rest of my life, because it really is important to every single human on this planet, just like our oceans. That's just, it's an amazing place, and it's very important to really meaningfully protect it.
That's terrific. So talking about fighting the oceans for the oceans, one of the other things I wanted to make sure we talked about before we do this amazing call to action at the end, where we're going to get people super jazzed about coming and supporting you guys, is the water challenge, the Earth Echo Water Challenge. Did I get that right?
Yes.
2 points.
Well done.
Thank you.
The Earth Echo. So we have a lot of different programs at Earth Echo, and one of the things that we've seen with respect to the current situation in the pandemic is actually we've been really busy because a lot of the resources that we develop are educational resources. It's again, a focus on youth. And so what we found is a lot of the resources we've created for predominantly teachers we're pivoting and modifying for use by the unintentional homeschoolers that a lot of parents have found themselves becoming, because it's really looking at how we help empower young people in whatever way we can. And so one of our programs, one of my favorite programs, is the Earth Echo Water Challenge. It's a global program. We've had over 146 countries participate, over 1.6 million people. And it's one of the largest citizen science water quality testing programs in the world.
Wow, that's amazing.
With a simple kit in your hands to go out into your community and test the water quality and post those results online, and then download resources that we provide about how to improve that water quality through various different campaigns in whatever way is appealing to you and ignites your passion, be it legislation or raising money or protecting land, whatever you're interested in. And we had almost 50,000 projects last year that resulted from the Earth Echo Water Challenge.
Wow.
Individual projects.
Yeah. Phenomenal.
From India to Brazil to Australia, you name it. And to Taiwan and Russia and all over Africa. And so that's a really exciting program. It's a really easy thing for people to do to get involved and engaged in their communities and recognize that the water shortage issue, which is certainly an issue, is a big problem. But the water crisis that we face isn't just about abundance. It's also about quality. And a lot of places deal with dirty water. In fact, diarrhea that's caused by dirty water is the number one killer for kids in the world. Still.
Right.
And so, water pollution, water quality is a massive issue. And really the only way that you ensure that water quality exists is by taking it into your own hands. I mean, here in the United States, we have thousands of communities that fail basic water quality standards across the country. Flint, Michigan got a lot of attention as being one of those places. But it's a big problem. It happens all over. It's a big problem.
And it's also, reminding people in more developed countries that, water just doesn't come out of your tap. It actually comes from a source.
Right.
Getting people out to their local watershed and testing it to see, that will be the water that comes out of your tap, but reminding them that it's not just a magic whoop, whoop. It's an actual living source.
Right.
And getting people to feel some attachment and some
ownership,
power and ownership. Thank you. Ownership over it.
Right. I think that's great too, because I think so people would know this. Earth Echo isn't just about the oceans. It's about water, right? And the oceans and the rivers and the atmospheric water collection and all these things they're all connected on the planet, right? So it's important for people to realize that. And I love that you guys expand that for people who, like me, growing up in Colorado, the only exposure I had to the ocean was Jaws, which of course was not right. That instills fear, which is terrible. It's right. It's terrible. But if you think about it, you guys are giving these people in other parts of the world that maybe have never seen an ocean the ability to connect with it, which I love so much, because we are all made up of water, our bodies, 70% water, the planet itself as well. And so I think that that's so great that you guys are doing that. So what I wanted to do was at the end, sort of here, wrap up how we can get people to come support the work that you're doing, these projects that you're working on at Earth Echo. This is the part of the show where, World on Purpose is designed to really mobilize people to action, to help them understand what their pivot to purpose is, and hearing what you guys have done and what you're working on and being able to follow up with you after. What is it that people can do to, if there were one or two things specifically, maybe something really large or something really small, like I know you guys have a lot of brands that support Earth Echo. So from a brand side, but also down to that one person, that one child, that one adult too, that individual who says, how can I do something for our oceans and help support your mission?
Okay, so I'll start and then you can follow up. Every choice that we make makes a difference, for better or worse. So we like to remind people that, I don't see your wallet. Usually Philippe's wallet's on the desk, but your wallet is one of the best ways to create change. So there we go. So,
very impressive.
So just remember that, support companies that you're proud of, that have your same goals and values, but also, when someone thinks, let's just talk specifically about plastic for a minute. If somebody wants to make their house less, the plastic free, or at least have less plastic, I completely understand that it's super overwhelming, because everything, if you open up your any drawer in your house, there's probably a lot of plastic in it. So instead of thinking this is too big of a mountain to tackle, just think every time you run out of something in your house, the next time you try to go replace it, just try to think of a better solution. So if it's getting toothpaste that's maybe in a glass jar, or if it's getting cleaning products that aren't in plastic, or make your own cleaning products at home, which also saves you money. So that, I feel like, is an easy way. Just every time you go to buy something, just try to make a better choice. If you're really thirsty and you're out on a run and you don't have your reusable water bottle, it happens to all of us, maybe reach for glass or aluminum or cardboard before you reach for that plastic water bottle. So it's just make a little tweak in your head, and it's easier to look at the plastic issue that way.
Yeah, shopping is politics, I think is a famous quote from Bono, and very important. I would say, as we're coming up on a big election, to say the least, in this country, regardless of party affiliation, we really need to stop the partisanship around the environment. The big kinds of solutions that we need to enact are largely political. And so remember that voting matters. And we need to get out there and tell our elected officials, again, regardless of our political affiliation, that clean air and clean water are fundamental universal values and rights that we should all be able to take for granted. But it's something right now that we can't. So vote.
Because remember, it was Richard Nixon it was Richard Nixon who signed the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the Marine Protected Act.
He founded the EPA.
And
That's
NOAA.
right.
And he created NOAA, the Marine Mammal Protection Act. Republican administration wasn't really until the early 80s or mid 80s that you saw this schism between the Republican Party and the environment. So we can bring it back. We are fiercely bipartisan in our work. We've had Republican people in government on our board of directors, for God's sakes. We're really believers that we all need to come together.
The environment has no party.
That's right. And
that's absolutely right.
And recognize that.
I think that's so great. We really have to understand that this concept of shared humanity, right? There's that we're not really all that different from each other. If we think about it, we all bleed the same. We all, have the same, like you said, human rights, Philippe. We all have those desires to be healthy, safe, happy, have love, all those things that are so, so important to the world. And that starts with taking care of our planet so that we can take care of ourselves.
Well, this pandemic has reminded us, I think, too, that we're all in this together. And, the war on science, what's really happened in the last few years, largely politically, I think, in this country, but also some businesses participate is if you can't kill the message because it's grounded in pretty good information, kill the messengers and kill the concept of science. So there's just basically been a war on science because there's certain folks that don't like the results of what science is telling us.
Right.
And so we've ignored science as it comes to public health, and look what's happened. We ignore science as it relates to another big problem like climate change. Look what's going to happen. Right. So we can only delay it and ignore it for so long. So the war on science that has been going on the last few years in our society needs to stop. We need to not allow that to continue and really be guided by information and not wishful thinking. So I think that's really important too.
I agree. I love that so much. And on that amazing way to end this show, I just want to thank you both. I know you're so busy. You have a brand new baby. Well, not brand new. She's almost a year old, right?
Yeah, 11 months. So
she's still new to us.
I was hoping she might make an appearance, but
I know, me too. I think she's still napping.
No worries. But I know you have so much happening and you're doing a lot from your, in quarantine. You're still making a massively huge, impactful difference in our entire ecosystem and planet. And on behalf of everyone out there, I am so grateful, that you exist. And the two of you doing this together with your sister and your mom and all these amazing people at the Earth Echo and these organizations. Thank you for everything you're doing. And thank you for your time that you have given me today. It means it's a huge honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're delighted.
And thank you for your friendship.
Thank you for your friendship and all the terrific work that you do. It's all of us coming together as a chorus is how we're going to change the world.
Exactly.
That's right. And before we go, and you're welcome. And thank you so much. You're welcome. And tell everybody one more time, for sake of where they can find you.
Sure. So Ashlan on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, etc. is at Ashlan Cousteau. Mm-hmm. And my social is at PCousteau. You can find us in those places.
Great. And those will be in the show notes. And you will be able to find Ashlan and Philippe and be able to ask them all of your burning questions. Please, everyone, understand that we are all connected and the ocean is what unites us. And this planet just really brings us all together. And I look to people like Philippe and Ashlan to be inspiring to you and hope that you will find your pivot to purpose and that we can be a part of that. Have a great day, everyone. And thanks, guys.
Thank you for taking this journey into a world on purpose with our incredible guests. To learn more about our amazing guests and their inspiring purpose-driven work, please go to aworldonpurpose.com. Don't forget to look at our call to action of the week to mobilize your desire for purpose into action. A World on Purpose can be found on Apple Podcasts and all the major podcast platforms, and the video version can be found on YouTube. If what you heard today inspires you, please write a review and like and share on the platform of your choice. We'd love to also hear from you and learn your pivot to purpose and the meaningful work that you do that lifts humanity. Send your stories to info@aworldonpurpose.com. I'd like to thank our World on Purpose team for making this show a reality. Once again, I'm your host, Alyssa Fisher-Harris. Thank you for tuning in to A World on Purpose. I look forward to seeing you soon.